Hi, I'm David.
Hi, I'm Diane, and we're teachers from the British Council in Singapore who work together with MADWISH on this project. And we're here today to talk about two different types of teaching methodologies.
So in today's session, we're just going to look at two different ways for teaching English. So first, I'm going to use one method, and after that, Diane's going to use a different method. And I'm actually going to be teaching Diane Spanish. Do you know Spanish, Diane?
No, not a word.
Wonderful. Okay.
Español.
And then you've told me that you're going to teach me German as well. So that should be interesting. Okay, so I'm going to start my Spanish lesson. Hi, Diane, how are you?
Yeah, hi.
Okay, so good. Today we've got a nice lesson all about parts of the body. So there's a few words I want you to learn. So in English, we say head. In Spanish, it's cabeza. So a head is cabeza. Yes, so that's head. That's head, okay? And then eyes, we say ojos. So ojos are eyes, okay? So we got head and eyes now. Then for your nose, we got nariz. Nariz. So we got head, eyes, and nose now, so you know those. Okay, and mouth, we got boca. Mouth is boca. And then ears, we've got orejas. Orejas are ears. So they're ears, okay?
Orejas.
Ears, okay? So there are ears, okay? And then I've also got shoulders, which is espalda. Espalda. So that's shoulders, okay? So in today's session, Diane, you've learned lots of words. You've learned the head, eyes, nose, mouth, ear, and shoulder in Spanish. Well done. Good job.
Okay.
Okay, so that is the end of my little Spanish session. Perhaps we'll talk a bit later on about my Spanish session and how you felt, Diane. So you're going to teach me German.
Guten Morgen. Guten Morgen.
Oh, good morgen.
Guten Morgen. Guten Morgen. Gut? Guten Morgen.
Good morgen.
Heute, wir haben Kopf.
Kopf.
Ja,
Kopf.
Mein Kopf.
Mein Kopf.
Augen.
Augen.
Was war das?
Kopf.
Ja, gut, sehr gut. Kopf und die?
Augen.
Okay, super. So, Ohren. Wieder mal?
Ohren.
Super. Die waren?
Augen.
Super. Und?
Kopf.
Super. Nase. Die Nase.
Nase.
Die Nase.
Die Nase.
Super. Mund.
Mund.
Der Mund.
Der Mund. Die Nase. Augen. Oh. I'm thinking Spanish. Ohren.
Super, ja. Und?
Kopf.
Ja,
mein
und
Kopf.
Der letzte, Schulter.
Schultern.
Schultern.
Schultern. Schultern.
Ja, die Schultern.
Die Schultern.
Super. So, alle zusammen?
Kopf. Augen. Ohren. Nase. Oh. Mund. Schalken.
Schultern. Sehr gut. Also sehr gut. Prima. Wirklich gut getan.
Thank you. Okay, so that was just two very different lessons. So if you don't mind, Dan, we'll go through learning Spanish first and how you felt and how much you learnt. You're shaking your head?
I don't know a single one. So shoulders were the last one you mentioned, and I think it was S something or other, but I couldn't remember.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Concentrating on pronouncing, but I can't remember.
Yep, okay. So for you anyway, that seemed quite an ineffective lesson for me as a teacher. I wouldn't be happy if my students came out not learning much. So if we move on to my session, learning
So
German
how
from
did
you.
feel about that session with the German words? Do you still remember them?
I still remember some of them. Still struggling with some though. So yeah, I felt like I learned I don't know how long it was, a 2-minute session. I felt that I did learn the vocabulary, which would have been the purpose of the lesson. I felt uncomfortable and safe at the same time, because uncomfortable because I didn't understand everything, but you were very encouraging with lots of thumbs up and praises, and I think it helps that super and super sound very close, but it was clear from body language as well that you were giving praise and I got it right.
And did that help that you heard different words for the same meaning? So super, prima, wirklich gut.
I think I was concentrating more on the words for the body. Yeah, so I think if we were having more German lessons in the future, then I would pick up on those kinds of things. So, and I feel like, yeah, in a limited context for body parts, I feel that I would know that vocabulary. So yeah, I found that a much more effective lesson. So I used the grammar translation method. Historically, it's been used for academic use. So before people could travel regularly to other countries and before texts were available in different languages, so people used to translate books. The focus is very much on the grammar, and people used to translate texts so that then they could learn from the knowledge.
In my section, I use the communicative approach. And here you want to use English right from day one and in context.
Okay, so it's also important to set up a meaningful context. So you need to focus very much on the meaning and not on the grammar initially. And as part of the meaningful context, you need to think about the student's level. So you're using appropriate vocabulary for their level.
And then we look at pace to really make it meaningful and for it to sink in, to make the learning sticky. The students really need to come across these items, particularly if you're starting with items of vocabulary, they need to come across it at least 5 times for it to stick. So that's why you noticed that we were doing the vocabulary, we were eliciting it from the students, giving them time to think about it, getting them to create the space for the learning to take place, and then you repeat it. You give them plenty of opportunity to hear the words, pronounce them, repeat it together to give them confidence, and then you swap it around to make sure that it sticks.
Okay, so Diane, how much of the known language, we'll call it L1, was used by the student? How much was used by the teacher, and how much of the new language was used?
Well, if I remember rightly, the idea was that you were eliciting the language from them, making sure they had the right word. So they were saying the new vocabulary almost immediately, pronouncing it correctly, and then we would have gone on to use it in context. So they're using it 3, 4, 5 times in a very short space of time. That's why the pace is important.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, in your lesson, I was speaking most of the time. In my lesson, I was speaking most of the time as well. So the communicative approach really makes the student do the heavy lifting as well.
That's the important point, yes, that the students do the work.
And I guess that leads us to the next question about the proportion of the time the teacher was speaking. I think it's quite clear that in the communicative approach, it was a lot less than in the grammar translation approach. We could argue about
just maybe for correction. Yeah.
So we can argue about percentage. I would say roughly the student was speaking 70–80% of the time.
I would agree, yes. That's the plan, is to get them to do most of the work and you to support them so that they've got close to the target.
And I think the other thing you mentioned earlier was giving them the time as well to think, process it and speak. So it's very easy to just jump in.
I was going to say, I like the next question. How did the teacher know the student had learned something? It's very immediate. You can tell whether they've got it or not, especially when you start, because you're repeating it constantly. So you're asking them to repeat and you stop offering it. As a teacher, you stop offering the example and you're actually getting it from the students themselves. So you know they've got it.
Yeah, absolutely. For the lesson I took with the grammar translation method, I had no idea if you'd learnt it. I just knew I taught it, but I didn't know if you'd learnt it there. So yeah, getting them to actually do something in the language to demonstrate that they can use it. Something we touched on earlier, how many seconds did the teacher wait for the student to speak or answer questions?
You give them time to listen to what was asked for, but you're eliciting it. But you do give them time. You do need to give them thinking time.
Because I think sometimes I find myself counting up to either 5 or 10 because it is very tempting to jump in. And I know initially when I started teaching, I would actually I would count in my head up to 10, just to give them that space. And I liked what you did in the lesson as well, where I couldn't remember one of the parts of the body and you just gave me the starting sound. And from that, I was able to get the rest of it.
And using the gap thing, if it's a sentence, you can actually say if it's I like doing this, and they get I and doing, so you get I doing, I la 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 la. So you can encourage them and identify where the error is without them actually feeling that they've made a mistake. You know, it's more supportive.
Yeah, it's more supportive, and it's also coming back to some of the things we said earlier. They're speaking more, and it's showing that they demonstrate their knowledge, or perhaps lack of knowledge if you're doing that error correction, but you're guiding them to show what they know.
It's really good though. You're preparing them for the grammar recognition too. You're making them aware of the parts.
Yeah, true. Our last question, we may have touched on this earlier. How many times did the student repeat the words?
Oh, a lot.
Yes.
About 5 times within a very short pace, space of time.
Yeah, and I think another key thing here is not just during the lesson. In an ideal world, the students would then revise this maybe 1 hour later, 1 day later, and 1 week later.
Absolutely.
So it's difficult for us to directly control this, but I think if you let your students know and set this up for like homework, for instance, do it straight after the lesson, review it tomorrow, and then when you have the class the next week, a little review section at the beginning for a short time.
Yeah, and ideally, when we're talking about lower level, well, it's true at all levels, but at lower level, you want it to be some material that they are going to immediately use.
Yes, exactly. Something they can apply to their life. Okay. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you. So that's our explanation of the 2 approaches, and I hope you can see that the communicative approach is much more immediate, is more likely to engage your student, and they will be immediately able to make use of the language they learn.
Okay, so thanks for your time. If you've got any questions, comments, or you just need some support, just feel free to put a comment in the box below. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.